Okay, so this is project 1-16. This will lend itself to the contours and regions if you want to draw this profile and have the geometry make selections. This might also be a good one that we go look for the midplane, mainly because if this geometry, and it's saying it's half an inch and our thickness is 1 inch, rather than going back and cut extruding this down, maybe we cut extrude it out. So again, there's no right or wrong ways. Whatever geometry you recognize that you see, the sketches that you make, they're all part of your learning, getting into the geometry, building it out, and kind of getting to that next level. If it worked and it worked well, continue to do it. If it's something that, well, I really painted myself into a corner and I had to work my way back out of it, well, then also put that in your toolbox as a, let's not try that again real soon. We'll pick it back up at some point though. All right, so I'm going to stay with my template. And we'll stay in the front plane. This part also jumps out at me as having symmetry. And the word symmetry to me means I'm going to use a center line. And the center line is going to be infinite length vertical through the center of the part. And the only reason that it's infinite length is that it is convenient to never run out of center line or have one small enough that you might put an object line over top of it, that you would have to do that select other thing to find it. So vertical, infinite length, drop it on the origin. I've said I think it's about as easy just to go ahead and select than it is to uncheck boxes and back out of the command once you've kind of gone down the center line path. So this also, I don't recall talking about the continuous arc. So I drew a line, and at some point you will probably do this on purpose or by accident, or on purpose on accident. I drag my line out and I go back to the start point. It's going to switch me into arc, and the arc command will go back through. I want to go to a different direction. I go back to the start and I drag a different way. See, I'm trying to get it to go that way. So the unders, the overs, it's just a matter of manipulating it a little bit, but we can pretty much get that arc kind of in whichever direction that we want it to go. All right, small line, another arc, back to the start point. And because this is symmetry, if I draw the whole arc, I'm going to mirror it back on, at least part of it back on itself. All right, so I'm going to put in a little dimensions to get the scale. And we had 1.5 inch radius. I think I've mentioned this before, but circles automatically get radiuses. Let's see, the circles automatically get diameters, arcs automatically get radiuses, and you know, if you want to change them, that's where we're going to the liters. So 1.75. All right, so there's a little bit of inversion going on that it jumped on me, and I'm just going to grab an endpoint and drag something up, kind of zoom in, drag something over, and put it back the way that I expected it to be. All right, so it's not a big deal that it can do those things. What the problem is kind of going back through and recognizing if I pull this way and I stretch this way, that will get it back to the desired result. So my center point, and control select the center line, make those coincident. That's going to give me a 90-degree arc. What else do we have? All right, we'll throw in some, well, let's go ahead and get the circle in. It was also 1.5 inches, and that was the diameter. Okay, so we have this dimensioning scheme. I've drawn half of my part, but I want to dimension from center to center. Well, they went center to outside, so just as good as an example. So either to the arc or the circle, I'm going to place the dimension. If I'm in between the center line and the object, I get the radial dimension or the half dimension, or that linear dimension. I jump to the other side, I get a diametral dimension or the full dimension across the center line. So it gave us 3 inches and 3 inches off of the center line, so I'll go ahead and use that one. But when you see this jump, based on your selections, in between and to the other side. Mainly if I was revolving this would put me automatically to where I could generate diameters without having to multiply by 2 for everything, getting the radius to a diameter number, or divide by 2 to get the diameter back to the radius. All right, so 3 inches and 3.175. All right, we have one more circle. Well, I guess this is a good time to go ahead with the mirror. Left to right is everything inside, not the center line. Center line was crossing. So if I go into mirror, it's going to ask me to mirror about, and I would select the, well, if I ever remember to jump down to mirror about, then I would see the preview. Nice thing is that you see the preview and you know what it's going to look like. Selecting right to left is going to be everything including the center line because of the crossing window. Anything that the window crosses is going to be selected. I don't think it matters going from top to bottom, but the main thing is the general direction of the window is from right to left. When I hit mirror, I automatically get the result. So, 2 seconds faster? But it depends on what your workflow, what you're comfortable with. All right, we'll put our 2-inch diameter in. And at this point, this is a standard extrusion. There's one region, this will extrude out, and I could go ahead and put the hole in the box in separately. What I'm seeing more often is that we're drawing in the geometry, so I'll go ahead and put that in. The other mirror is to select, control, select, since I only have one object, and then connect those dots. So that was 2 inches by 1.5. And then it's circle. And the 0.75, kind of a toss-up to dimension or to use a relation. I do have a relation here. I can right-click and select the midpoint of a line, and then control-select the center point of the circle, and those can be horizontal. So it's one of those little hidden things that, just dragging over top of it, well, I can see it. I can be able to select it. Oh, it would let me select it. So I don't necessarily have to right-click, but when you right-click and see the words, that maybe makes it a little more, registers a little better as to what the function is. And 0.75. Okay, so fully defined sketch. And I did not cross anything over anything other. I don't think I left any gaps. So when we go to the extrude boss base, it's going to ask for the selected contours. Again, a contour would be the outside. And it's not filling it in. But it did not turn on the thin features. So let's see. I guess that's pretty much a preview. Okay. And our dimension is 1 inch. All right, so to manipulate that is, do I go 1 inch in what would be positive Z or negative Z? And notice that my arrows, as soon as I start flipping, I get a single. and a double-headed arrow. That is denoting the direction 1 and direction 2. The single-headed arrow, direction 1, double is direction 2. So because we can manage these separately, staying in the blind in condition, if I were to go 0.5 in direction 1 and 0.5 in direction 2, then I would have the same net effect as doing a midplane. All right, midplane, we give it the overall value, it splits it across that plane, and we end up with our thickness, but in this case, the front plane bisects the part. All right, so if I wanted the backside for some reason to be 1 inch and the front to be 2 inches, then I'm going to be able to load those differently by using direction 1, direction 2. Where midplane says it's going to split it to whatever thickness, so in this case I'm at 3 inches. If I was staying at 3 inches, it would put 1.5 forward, 1.5 back, and it would be 3 inches thick with the front plane going through the middle of the part. All right, so I'm going to turn direction 2 on. Mention the arrows again. So if you grab an arrow and then it goes to the number, can't quite see it because of the angle that I'm at. I'm kind of on top of it. Maybe that's a little better. So it goes from kind of a coarse resolution to, when you get the double arrows, is a finer resolution. But I'm not going to chase those numbers. I'm going to get close, or I just don't care. All right, so I don't use the ruler, but if you like that dragging close to the ruled number, it is available by picking on the arrow. All right, so no vertex to select. We haven't created a sketch. We haven't created other geometry. I don't have any surfaces. I don't have a surface to offset from. So I'm discounting the next four. And midplane puts me back to 1 inch. Okay, and because I was on the contour, it is just going all the way around and generating our geometry. All right, so I have that sketch, and I have geometry in it that I can share. I don't want to create a new sketch and with all new geometry when I have something that is already existing. So in this case, I'm going to expand out, highlight sketch 1, extrude boss base, and where before we did the contour, now I'm going to look for regions. And I told it that this was a boss extrude, which it is not. So we kick that out, make sure sketch 1, and then I go over to the correct extrude cut and into the selected contour. I have a region. All right, so it's finding its way, in this case, down. I'm going to double check by going Control 7 and getting into the isometric, and then I will flip the direction. Probably the one you'd want to be careful, and since I picked those as regions, notice that I'm also getting the cylinder, so that means I'm going to have a cylinder coming up through the center of this. So let's just see what the result is. We'll go ahead and give it a through all and accept. And so I saw it on the preview, and that's pretty much what I got because I picked those two regions. So my choices are to go back and add either one more region or the contour. No, it doesn't look like it's going to take the contour. And that would have done half. So let's look at it as half. So I filtered out 1/2 of the circle because the center line does participate in the contour region selection. And we'll go pick one more. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Okay, make sure I got the right one. And then the preview goes away, and we'll select. So the downside is that's not really a candidate for contour because we have the 3 sides of the box, but this lower leg or that lower side of the box spans the entire part. So I can't really pick it out as a segment in my contour. So in that case, I'm going to have to pick regions. All right, and then one more region. We'll stay with the same sketch, extrude cut. In this case, I can go to the contour because it's closed as a circle, tell it through all, and get the circle. All right, so the test then is when I want to make changes. There we go, 3. And we go find the front plane because we set it at the mid plane. The 1 inch is split ½ inch forward, ½ inch back of the plane that we were sketching on. And then I use that a little bit to the advantage. I don't know that it is really that big of a deal. Sharing the sketch is probably a little bit easier, but there are going to be times where you would want to convert the entities that you've already generated. So I'm going to suppress these out. The suppression state says they're there, but they don't exist. They will go to a gray, where if we hide, it's still there. It's still we're still able to see the part, and it will participate in the engineering, the mass, the volume of the model, and I can show. And if I were to go through and try to do something with my suppressed items, well, they're not participating in hardly anything. Right, we can edit the sketch, I can unsuppress it, but we've lost a lot of that capability. All right, so I want to see it again. I go in and I tell it to unsuppress. It's back. So this is kind of the basis of configurations, and the having more than one part tied to this single part file. All right, so let's go ahead and do a control. All right, so if I were to show my sketch, interior of the part, and open up a new sketch on the outside, I don't have to redraw. I can go into a rectangle, pick up that existing geometry, and just trace over the top of my geometry. Or we have this thing called convert entities. And convert entities generates a on-edge relation that's tied to that other sketch, that other geometry. So when I convert the entities, it shows everything as in black, fully defined, but I can grab an endpoint and I can still drag them. Okay, so those free lines, they're defined as long as I don't bother them. As soon as I move one, it goes to underdefined, and then I am being responsible for getting it back to being related. And then features will extrude cut, and I kind of wanted to stay there because I actually have some vertices. All right, so an end condition that was up to next will find all the way through the part, just like through all. Through all both would add direction 2. There's nothing in direction 2, so I would have an error that says cannot terminate feature in that direction. There's nothing there to cut. It's not going to like it, or it's not going to do it. All right, so these in this case are going to do basically the same things. Vertex can be a corner. All right, so same result, different selection. Can also be part of a sketch. So if I can rotate around, I can find the endpoint of that sketch. Didn't really update. Let's see if it does it correctly. All right, so vertex is the intersection of my object geometry, or features, the cut features, the boss features, or if I can generate a sketch with endpoints or something that I can select, I can treat it as a vertex as well. All right, and then the other one would be to open up another sketch, convert entities, and go right back into extrude cut. Through all or up to next. And I would say, since through all is first, go with through all. If you find that it cuts too much, you can always go back in and say up to next. So let's see, how would I do that without going into direct editing and making this really complicated? All right, so since I forgot all the circles, kind of the test of the stability of the sketch and your strategy is if I edit this feature and I get rid of the contour, and I go back in and select regions and leave the circles unselected, how many errors will I generate? Alright, so in that process, that converted entity, it changed just a little bit, right? Because going from the full contour, something, well, let's go ahead and see. Something that it couldn't find, or is it? Well, it's in the sketch. So when the yellow is, when the yellow explanation point is at the sketch level and the feature level, there is something going on in the sketch, and possibly something also going on with the feature. So display, delete. Now that all looks good. Overdefining not solved. So not sure why it lost its reference to that that geometry. It's still showing fully defined, but it's not letting it solve. So let's edit the feature. It still has the vertex. All right, so worst case, I'd have to either regenerate the geometry or do a little more digging. Let's see what the other one looks like. All right, so it's still warning me about feature sketch 2. So even though it is now suppressed, I still have a problem with that sketch with that converted geometry. The other two that were all shared as the one sketch, not so much. All right, but I can't predict that. I can't say with any certainty that when I make that change or I made that decision that I was going to get this result, and if I change it to something else, then I'm going to get a different result. I'm going to expect that I would get an error and be able to diagnose it and work back through it. So I don't think that one is better than the other as far as a strategy. And what I would be looking for in this sketch to try and diagnose it, there are no little amber dots anywhere, so let's just try the one. Since it kind of highlighted along that edge, let's just reproduce that one line. Yeah, it's building correctly, but there's still something going on. There. All right, so select chain, convert entities. Gonna go back to just the line. All right, so that left a gap. All right, so about the time that I do this 3, 4, 5 times, because we changed the geometry, this is that point where I finally go back through the process and I say, I lost a plane. So the second tab in on my right mouse button context menu is to edit the sketch plane. When you edit a sketch plane, there's my missing face. It is another one of those hidden little, I don't know any of the textbooks that say, wow, I have a sketch that won't, that is showing me this error, go change the sketch plane or reselect the sketch plane. So watch what happens when I pick the face. The face that I originally sketched, because I made a fairly drastic change in my feature, my initial boss-based feature generation, it lost that face. It recreated it, and whatever it was tied to or whatever is going on in the background, that face was no longer there. So it's going to show me that error until I remember or realize that I need to right-click and, okay, there we go, right-click and edit sketch plane. And usually it is one of those, it takes me 3, 4, 5 times of, I know I can get this sketch to work. I know it's something in the sketch. At some point, if it'll click that I've lost that face, this is where we're going to come and edit the sketch plane, reselect the face, and that's going to correct the geometry. It's a nasty little trick. All right, so hide sketch 1. So at this point, I have 2 of the same thing. If I were to go back and unsuppress my first 2, these 2 are in conflict because the geometry is already removed. One of them has to have priority. So these can be what-if scenarios. What if I build it this way? I kind of like that, but I think it would be better if I built it this way. Suppress that out. They're okay. And this is the lead-in into configurations where I would say, I want a defined configuration that is these 2 and then is these 2. All right, but I think I'm already seeing kind of deer in the headlights with the whole edit sketch plane thing. So I'm gonna tease with the configurations and say that there is a lot of horsepower in the running in the background there. All right, so that was 1-16. All right, so I guess the point's going to be that you have all of those in conditions to play with, and when you get used to those, that's when we're going to throw in or potentially throw in the from. So you have from and to basically, direction 1 and direction 2. Most of the time your from will be collapsed. I don't think I want to do that on this one. We already had enough fun with it, so I'm going to save it and go on to the next one, and we'll demonstrate what from does. But each of those property managers, as they're coming up and you're generating geometry, you have all of those combinations. You have the different parameters that you can build into depending on what you're trying to accomplish. All right, so 1-17, I see symmetry. Back to the center line. All right, and this one is in metric. So file new, part metric, front plane, sketch, center line, vertical, infinite length. That is one of those key set of factors that I could almost write a macro. In fact, if we get to a point where we want to look at macros, we may write a line macro that says, give me a vertical, give me a horizontal, infinite length. But once I place it, select it. Get back into, and either L on the keyboard or right click and go to sketch entities or the S key. Again, you have so many choices of how to get back and through things that stay with the ones that are familiar and you're confident in. And then as you get a little bit faster, you get a little impatient. When you get to that point where you have the little, there's got to be a better way to do this. There are probably 4 of them. All right, so back into the line. I'm going to put which way do I want to go? Yeah, we'll put that at the bottom. Let's see, that was 36. We were 80, and it's showing me a radius of 60, so that would give me an overall of 90. Now, I'm going to get myself in trouble doing math again, so let me select. All right, so what I'm interested in is the center point of this arc lying across the at the baseline. So if we're 80 and that was 60, and we had a radius of 60, okay, so diameter, radius of 20, okay. So that works out. 80 minus the radius of 20 puts it at 60, so I can safely say that my center point will be along that bottom edge. The reason that's important is I started the sketch. If I do that continuous radius, I want to bring this back up and look if I can find the inference line. If not, oh well. I will come back to it. And then because I'm going back to line, as long as I have an endpoint, as long as I'm coming from that endpoint, I can go back into it and go into the next radius. All right, so that'll speed up the sketching at least a little bit. So what I want to see here is that I am coincident, or in the case of the endpoint of the arc and the center point, is that it's vertical. All right, so different combinations yielding similar, if not the same result. So don't get locked into, oh, this, last time it gave me that coincident. Well, mainly it gave me coincident because I selected the line. If I'd selected the endpoint and the endpoint again, it would have put me right back to horizontal vertical. So pay attention to your selection, not so much selection order, but pay attention to your selections and start to build in that logic that says the line object and the center point are going to give me coincident, point and point are going to give me horizontal or vertical. And the net result is pretty much the same. All right, so let's see how this builds. Scales to 60. Radius was 20. Let's see, we had an overall of 200. So going across the top, I'll use the reference dimension from center point to center point. And since this is a full dimension, I'll go from the arc to the center line. Again, if I'm between those two objects, I will have a radial or a half dimension. And if I go to the other side, I have the full dimension. When I finish the mirror or complete the selection, that will have something to connect to. If this becomes a revolve, then it's already at its diameter. All right, so let's make this a revolve real quick just for fun. We're going to do so much boss extrudes that we don't get to do too much in the way of the revolves or later. So the way I differentiate is that if you're familiar with the manufacturing processes, if you're putting this part on a mill and you're going to machine it prismatically, or you're going to put this on a lathe and machine it cylindrically, then that's going to drive, are we going to make a boss extrude or a boss revolve? To make this a boss revolve, I need to close it off. If I don't close it off, it will ask me, but it still wants a contour region. It wants an enclosed space. And the difference is that when I go to revolve, it's going to revolve around that center line as a default. I can pick any geometry that does not produce self-intersecting. Revolves about that line. It's going to make a little bubble, be looking kind of weird, but whatever. Or the other way, a little dish. All right. So since we weren't really shooting for revolve geometry, let's see, we had that one. Oh, not ready to extrude it yet either. So I'll take out the line that I put in. But as you're designing, as you're thinking through the process, that's kind of where that decision falls out at. Okay, so that went to 80, and the 60 and the 20, I automatically went to a driven dimension, right? So again, I have my do not show turned on for the make this driven, and as long as I recognize that this is grayed out and it's not going to participate, then I can just go ahead and delete it. All right, so that one's horizontal, and the infamous, I did not get tangency. It looked really close to tangency, but it was not tangency. All right, so that whole pick something that is blue and drag. This is where the diagnostic tool comes into play. If I can move that, okay, and it's in blue, so I know I can move it somehow. I may not be able to move the line, or only be able to move the line a little bit. The endpoints are sometimes a better selection, sometimes the object is a better selection. But it being that close to tangent, but not quite tangent, that's a fairly common occurrence. It's probably one of the things that you will pick up most often, because this was a continuous tangent arc, and I pulled the next arc off tangent as well. I kind of expected this to be tangent, but when I highlight, I'm not seeing a tangent symbol. So select, control select, tangency, and that'll go defined. Let's see, those are going to be away, so window picking right to left, mirror entity. Now my 200 has something to be connected to, as opposed to the diameter that would be generated by a revolve. Circle. And that one is diameter 50. And its position is 36. And then linear pattern, we'll start over here. Had a radius of 20 and we have a diameter of 20. Okay, so I started to say about the leaders that by default we get the circle gets the diameter, the arc gets the radius. If for some reason I wanted to show that circle as a radius, we can change it. We pick the dimension, go from value to liters, and I'm going to be able to switch it to an R value. Or the same with the arc is once I select it, I can switch it over to a diameter. So use that where you need it. When you have a good reason to use it. Doing it haphazardly will probably generate you more confusion than it's worth. Just be aware that it can occur. Alright, so the linear pattern, linear sketch pattern, we're going to end up with, this one didn't give me a count. So we had 4 times 50, which was the space. So 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces, but it didn't call out the 5 times on the circle diameter. So we're going to have a total number of instances. So 5 instances, and it gave me 50 in between. And so when we did this on Tuesday, we let it do the dimension X spacing. So this time I'm going to leave the dimension off so that we can see the result. All right, so if I'm able to drag, those are going to stretch. It's still not letting me revolve it or move it around. Well, I'd expect to be able to spin it, so it's a good sign that it's not. But in this case, if I were to go ahead and drop that center point on the center point of the other arc, that gives me the same thing as if I'd put in dimension. And if I go put in a dimension after doing that, I should see it at 50, but because I turned the show dialog box off, I'm going right to a driven dimension. The little points at the, there might be one at the origin, but the little point here at the top middle, that is by virtue of I mirrored it, that is a reminder that that was the mirror point. It finds that intersection and it puts a point there, so you have it. And then this is a thickness of 12. Go ahead and accept. And we're what, 17? All right. 18 is also in metric, so let's go ahead and pull 18 up. So a couple different ways to do this, just like everything else. If I could tell you generate this part this way every time you encounter something close to it, it'd be a lot easier. You have all of these tiny decisions as you're going through, picking your strategies, things that you're familiar with, things that you're experimenting with, and the kind of the building blocks getting to the next level. Drawing this, I have the choice of staying with contours and regions and just generating all of the geometry and picking what I want to extrude. Or I can go back and I can trim. So we'll look at it from both sides. Circle. into the dimension, and we had an outside that was a radius of 100. Okay, so this is where radius of 100, because it is an arc segment. I'm drawing it as a circle and then going to end up trimming it out. Even after I trim it or whatever I do with it, that dimension is still going to stay as a diameter, or still stay as a radius. All right, whatever was in its previous state. And then the circle is at 80. And I went over to a quadrant, so since I did that and was not thinking about it, we will do it again. All right, so whenever you drag over, okay, so going back into the circle, whenever you drag over an existing circle, you're going to have the 4 diamonds, one at each of the quadrants. And then you're also going to get the center point of the circle. So even if I come out here, draw a circle, and let's just go into the point. I drag over top of it, there's the center point. I go to a quadrant, I'm going to be able to pick that coincident, vertical, horizontal, whatever was part of the selection. All right, so going into the circle, I'm looking for its quadrant. I'm looking for those 2 little yellow boxes. And then we'll go into the dimension. We had, that was a radius of 40, so 80. And then do I want to draw 4 of these, or do I want to pattern? All right, so if we go to the pull down, circular sketch pattern, it's going to ask me for a center point as a location. I can shift off that center point some value. Well, let's go ahead and give it, we're going to generate 4 of those. Oh, would help to have an entities to pattern since I didn't pre-select it. I get the preview. And if I tell it to dimension this radius or dimension the angular spacing, it's going to give me center lines, it's going to give me angles, and I may not, I'm going to have its control, maybe not the control that I want. So we're going to deal with those a little bit later. When I place the pattern, these are still free to move. Notice that it also generated a center point, a point that was located at the center of the pattern. When we get over to Hole Wizard, this point is a problem. This point generates another instance. It generates another hole location within the Hole Wizard that when I go into the drawing and I put 4 holes into a part, I put a hole call out on it, it tells me I have 5. That's the 5th. So if I drag that back to the center and want to use it, that will cause it to go fully defined. If I decide that that point is a problem and I get rid of it, then we're going to bring one back coincident. And there again, it is showing me coincident and horizontal as a relation. I'm pretty assured that it's going to go fully defined. If not, then I would have to do both. I would have to say that that center point is coincident, and then the center point is horizontal to the origin. All right, so all these little combinations, we're just doing puzzle after puzzle after puzzle of what combination is going to give me a desired result. All right, so at this point, if I'm happy with the contour and region, extrude boss base, there is my region, and this is 15 millimeters thick. And that is the result. And if I wanted to have some other component that was going to build off of these other tabs, whatever this locks into as a drive mechanism, maybe I wanted to build it separately or as another body, I can come back, share this sketch, and utilize those items. All right. Otherwise, we're going to go into the trim command and back into sketch, under to the trim entities. I'm not real fond of power trim, but as an example, yeah, that's about as far as I can go. Trim entities, don't really have a corner there. Trim away inside, Most of the time I am trim to closest, which is going to let me just pick, and if I decide, oh, maybe I didn't want to do that one, I can Control Z, I get one back. The power trim, everything that I trimmed and then missed, I get everything back and I get to do it over again. So most of the time if I do trim, it's going to be trim to closest. And again, those are personal preferences. If you want to power trim away. Okay, so having done that, now this one's still going to be a diameter. This dimension and this dimension are now radiuses. I don't like the extension line for whatever reason. This is a, nope, only a feature the same size. Let's see if I can click it. No, okay, so that's giving me the inside. No, it's not going to let me manipulate it that way probably because of the trim. All right, so I want that to go over to a radius. We send it over to a radius. I want that diameter to go over to a radius. I can send it to a radius. Clicking on the arrow, and since it didn't go, well, I guess it's more of a diameter thing anyway, but do I want the arrow pointing to the outside or to the inside? Minor little detail, but it also works the same in the drawing, so just be aware that you can change those extension lines to a certain extent. Well, that one got rid of the extension, so. All right, so the difference is that I trimmed all of those out. I go into the features, I extrude boss base. We went 15 millimeters, and now I don't have to select anything with the contours and regions because it is a singly nested part and it will produce the desired result. All right, so there's going to be, there's going to be times where it's just easier, or the geometry lends itself that you sketched everything out, there was no contours and regions to select, we're just in this standard, didn't need to, standard sketch, standard icon. But there's other times where it may be to an advantage to overlap the entities, to draw the 2D sketch and then pick your contour and region. Either way, you're generating the geometry. There's not going to be one strategy that's better than the other. It's what you're comfortable with, what you understand, and how you see it being created. All right. So the drawing portion. Again, drawings are not required. A couple ways to get into the drawing was the new. There's also make drawing from part. I don't use these as much because I want to select my template. If I make drawing from part, oh, and it comes up with a template. Sometimes it goes to the default. So back in my options, I have a checkbox that says select or go to the default. I obviously have picked select. Since you're going to have the standard drawing, I'm going to pick for the drawing, and it's going to come up with this sheet format and size. If you are seeing only standard formats, you will see A0 through A4. That one is obviously an A4 portrait. 3, A2, A0. So if I remember correctly, A0, let's see, A, B, E, yeah, that would be associated to an E-size sheet. So as you unfold a piece of paper, 8.5 by 11 or whatever it is by millimeters, you unfold it once, that's your B size. You unfold it twice, that's your C size. You unfold it again, that is the D, and one more is the E. Okay, so you come back over to show all. Stay with like the A landscape if you're going to print anything out. The problem that I have with the A landscape though is this takes up about 1/3 of my usable space. So the first thing when I see this is I want to just start wiping out the template. I want to go into that sheet format and just delete a bunch of stuff that I'm not going to use. For your purposes and for the assignments that do require the drawings, a size template with this title block is going to be fine. And then we'll go through kind of a quick, I want to say the last couple semesters, those template lectures have been pretty well concise. So if you're interested and want to build your own template, last springs and last falls were pretty good. So I don't know that I can, I'll find some way to improve on it, but we'll kind of fall back on those for this semester. All right, so getting a part into the drawing, have to have five ways, of course. So we're going to bring from view layout, model view, and 18 was where we started. I want to go for the browse, and let's go to the beginning. And this one is going to be create multiple views. Not really worried about scale at this point, but let's see, we're on sheet scale. Oh, went to custom scale, so let's go to sheet scale. Oh, that was probably just for that. Well, maybe not. Go ahead and bring that in. And if you want one part per file, or you want a drawing package, now's the time to decide. If I want one, then I'm going to save this. This is going to be P1-1, solid draw. Save it, close it. Go to the next file. If you want a drawing package, oops, I went back into part by habit. A landscape. Then at the bottom we have sheets. So let's go with, I can do the insert pull down, drawing view, there's a model item, and browse. And we'll jump over to 2. And I think, I won't say all companies, but a lot of the companies that I've talked to are people that are actively detailing. They're pretty much migrating over to the view palette. And then said, do you want to have a drawing package? Then I add the sheet 2. Go back into the folder. This was everything that was open. Let's see, 1-8. Okay, not going to get to those, so I'll go into the view palette. The view palette says, oh, that's the one that's open. That's not the one that I need, though. So I'm going to hit the ... pick number 3. This shows me the preview of views. The advantage of this is that if this was drawn in the top, was drawn in an orientation other than the front, maybe I want the left side, for whatever reason, to be my primary view. Then I can project, and project. Get those 3 in. So projected view, after you place the first view out of the view palette, automatically goes into projected view, and you can place as many views as you want. If you want all 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, you can have them. You want to create the diametric, trimetric, we can drag those out too. Next. Since that wasn't in the File Explorer, let's go back to Windows here. Get into my 266, and if I drag, same thing, item 4, it's going to automatically go to model view. So if you drag from Windows into, then you're going to get this model view. It goes to create multiple views automatically, and we'll hit OK. Next is that we have something, well, we already have 18 open, so yeah, let's go ahead and do a tile horizontally. And so from an open document to the part, or sorry, from the part document to the drawing document, also opens in model view. I can get those views. All right, scaling. Well, we haven't done any scaling. I'm going to say my strategy, my practice, and we won't go through all 18, but you can kind of see that once I got on a roll here, I could go ahead and place all 18 sheets in a matter of minutes. Then, after I've got everything kind of in the order that I want it, and start that sequence, then I'll go back through and set the scales. Then I'll start doing the dimensioning. So it's kind of get everything set up, get everything visible, viewable, and go back through each of the steps. All right, so that was the only one that really didn't scale very well. So if I right-click in the properties, or I'm sorry, in the sheet, and by default, this is another one of those like little nuisance items. I want to say that you will not see properties automatically. So this is a good place to customize this menu. Whoops, didn't mean to do that. We'll give it another shot. And that one didn't show up near as well. So the double arrow at the bottom and customize menu. I don't hardly ever delete, so that would be one that I would uncheck. Properties is probably unchecked in yours. So by going to the customize, you can turn on the properties, and that one would be there. I know that there's a couple in there, so even if it's checked, there's going to be other places where if you see me pick something, it's because I turned it on, and that you'd go into that custom menu to make sure that it's active. All right, so properties, and there is the sheet name. If I were doing all 18 and space was critical, and probably just my general practice, is that I would change that to S4, so that instead of having all of the sheets across the bottom, I would have S1, S2. And about the same amount of parts that fit into a subassembly. There's kind of an optimized one more, what do you want to call it, the Goldilocks effect of one more part is too many, one less part is too few, and that last part was just right. I don't need to add anything else, or if I do, I'll add it later because I needed it there. And it just so happens to work out between somewhere between 2 and about 20 parts in a subassembly is kind of in that optimum range. A drawing package with 2 to about 20 sheets is about all you want to manage. So there's a point where you'll hit that mark and find out that it's pretty good. So I'm going to go to a quarter scale. Also, if you want to go to, let's see, instead of quarter, I wanted to go to 9/32 scale. It's going to let you. It doesn't really care. It's going to figure it out. So the difference between 0.25 and 0.281. Also notice the first angle and the third angle projection is under the properties. So if you find that your drawing views look really weird and backwards, it's probably because something defaulted to first angle. All right, and I kind of always try to explain it. Anybody that tries to explain it gets in trouble real quick, but basically I'll relate it as, are you rotating the part in reference to what you're looking at, or is the part stationary and you're rotating about the part? If you're changing your perspective, your body position in relation to the part, you would have first angle. If you're holding the part and rotating it, then you're in third angle. All right, so there's all the sheet formats. So I decided I didn't want the landscape. I can come back in and reload, change. Or we made a change to a template and I need to update my templates. I can come in. It does not automatically see that a new template was generated under that file name and update the drawing package automatically. If I had all 18 sheets and I made a change to the template that was a critical update, then I would want to go through each of these and reload the template for every one of those sheets. So I apply the changes, hit OK, and then the views are in relation to the front or to the primary. I did get dimetric or trimetric there, so put those in position. And we'll hold off on the layers, but you do have layer capabilities. Oh, and I think I locked my, I locked. So that one's in position, but my layer is selected. So this is very similar to what you would see in the Autodesk products. setting up a layer, line color, line types, and so we would go through and we would set a dimensions layer and save it to the template. Set our construction lines. Probably the main difference is that in AutoCAD I would use maybe 20, 30 layers. If I get to 3 layers in SolidWorks, I'm doing good. I can't hardly justify getting more than about 3 layers. Annotations then, applying dimensions just like we did out of the sketches. Just keep in mind that now we are paying more attention to, or going to be more concerned with there you go, with the placement and dimensions for manufacture. So I still have to find out what's going on with that setting. Why I'm not getting the diameter symbol there. Okay, I thought it would, I wasn't worried about it in the part because I thought it would pick up in the drawing, but apparently not. Yes.
When you make the dimension layers, and can you save those so that you don't have to do it for every drawing?
It's built into the template at that point. So when you're setting up a template, doing the title block, doing all of the things that you want to run in the background, that's also the time to set up at least the first couple layers. All right, again, so this being an intro is get in, tinker around, start getting some seat time with it. We're not looking for fully detailed ANSI Y14 dimension drawings. We'll go through, use the tools, see what the capabilities are, and start down that path.